The shuttle descended through the thick clouds of Ionis Prime, its engines humming softly in the dense atmosphere. As the landing gears touched down, a ripple of excitement passed through the cadets on board. Among them was Kale, his broad frame wedged uncomfortably into the narrow seat, his eyes fixed on the viewport. Draxos, his home planet, was a stark contrast to the lush greenery and sprawling complex of the Galactic Training Academy that now spread out before him. Kale was the first from his planet to be accepted into this prestigious institution, where the galaxy's finest warriors and tacticians were molded. Draxos was known for its harsh climates and deadly wildlife, earning it the moniker of a death world, a place where only the strongest survived. Kale had grown up dodging the predatory screeches and enduring the violent tempests that were part of everyday life. His physical strength and resilience were beyond that of ordinary humans, a fact that had raised both eyebrows and expectations at the academy. As the cadets disembarked, Kale stood a head taller than most, his muscles taut under the weight of his duffel bag. He walked with a quiet confidence that seemed to carve a solitary path around him. The others chattered nervously, sizing each other up, forming cliques based on species or familiarity. Kale, however, remained an outsider, observing but not engaging. The academy's entrance was grand, adorned with flags of the myriad planets represented by its students. They fluttered in the soft breeze, a symbol of the unity and diversity within the academy's walls. Kale's gaze lingered on the Draxian flag, a simple banner with a single golden star against a dark background. It was smaller than the others, its presence almost an afterthought. Commander Zorax, the Academy's chief instructor, was a stern-faced Talian with skin the color of deep sea. He stepped forward, his voice booming over the murmurs of the gathering crowd. "Welcome to the Galactic Training Academy," he began, his piercing gaze sweeping over the new arrivals. "You are here because you are the best your planets have to offer. But make no mistake, over the next 4 years, you will be pushed to your limits. Many of you will fail. Only the truly exceptional will succeed." Kale listened intently, his expression unreadable. The challenge in Zorax's words was clear, and it sparked a fire within him. He was used to being underestimated, used to being seen as a brute force from a primitive world. Here, he had a chance to change that narrative, to show that he was more than just a product of Draxos's ruthless nature. After the speech, the cadets were led to their quarters. Kale's room was small, utilitarian, with a bed, desk, and a window that offered a view of the training fields. He unpacked his belongings, a few clothes, a digital reader loaded with military tactics and survival manuals, and a worn picture of his family. They had been supportive of his decision to join the academy, proud and a little afraid for him. Kale placed the photo on the desk, a reminder of what he was fighting for. The first day ended with a communal dinner in the vast dining hall. Kale sat alone at the end of a table, quietly eating while observing the interactions around him. Groups formed naturally, laughter and conversations filling the air. Kale noticed a few curious glances in his direction, whispers about the Deathworlder who had joined them. He paid them no mind. He was here for a purpose, and nothing would deter him from achieving it. As lights dimmed across the academy, Kale lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the real training would begin, and with it, the opportunity to prove himself. He knew the road ahead would be tough, fraught with challenges and setbacks. But he also knew that he was not just fighting for himself or for Draxos. He was fighting for a place in this vast galaxy, for respect and recognition. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes, steeling himself for the day ahead. The journey had just begun, and Kale was ready. The first rays of Ionis Prime's sun streamed through the thin curtains of Kale's quarters, casting a warm glow across the Spartan room. Today marked the first day of practical assessments, and though many of the Academy's new recruits approached the morning with trepidation, Kale felt a stirring of excitement. Back on Draxos, the rising sun was a signal to prepare for the day's hardships, a reminder that survival never came easily. After a quick breakfast of nutrient-dense rations that reminded him uncomfortably of Draxos's coarse sustenance, Kale joined the throng of cadets heading toward the training fields. The grounds were a sprawling network of obstacle courses, firing ranges, and combat simulations, all designed to test the limits of the Academy's attendees. The day's schedule was grueling, beginning with physical fitness assessments. Kale noted the diversity in his fellow cadets' physical abilities. Some, like the nimble Zephyrians, excelled at agility-based tests, darting through complex obstacle courses with ease. Others, like the sturdy, four-armed Nalradians, showed their strength in the weightlifting stations. Kale's turn came, and all eyes seemed to turn towards him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The first test was a standard sprint. At the signal, Kale exploded forward, his powerful legs propelling him so quickly that he crossed the finish line in a fraction of the usual time. Whispers ran through the crowd as the timer displayed a new record. The next few tests only cemented his prowess. In strength training, Kale lifted weights that many cadets struggled to even roll across the floor, setting another record. His agility was less graceful than the Zephyrians but astonishingly effective, his large frame moving with a surprising litheness that contradicted his muscular build. However, it was the endurance test that truly separated Kale from his peers. The exercise required cadets to navigate a course designed to simulate a hostile environment with high winds, pelting synthetic rain, and uneven terrain. Most cadets completed the course in about an hour, exhausted and drenched to the bone. Kale started the course amidst a hush of anticipation. He moved with a steady, unrelenting pace, seemingly impervious to the artificial elements thrown at him. Where others staggered, he strode. Where others faltered, he surged forward. He completed the course in under 15 minutes, emerging on the other side barely winded, his expression as calm as if he'd just taken a leisurely walk. The collective mood among the onlookers was a mix of awe and disbelief. Commander Zorax, who had been observing from the sidelines, approached Kale with a scrutinizing look. "Impressive, Cadet Kale," he said, his voice betraying a hint of respect. "It seems Draxos has forged you well. But the Academy is not just about physical prowess. Tomorrow, we test your mental acuity." That evening, Kale's achievements were the talk of the Academy. In the dining hall, cadets from various backgrounds whispered about the day's events, throwing glances in his direction. Some were openly admiring, others wary and resentful. A small group of cadets from technologically advanced planets discussed the possible scientific explanations for his abilities, wondering aloud if his muscle density and pain threshold were a result of his home planet's gravity or perhaps a genetic predisposition. Kale, for his part, ate quietly, his thoughts inward. He was aware of the stir he'd caused, and while part of him was pleased with the recognition, another part remained focused on the challenges ahead. Physical tests were one thing, the mental and strategic challenges would be a different battleground. Later, as Kale returned to his quarters, he was stopped by a small group of cadets. A Zephyrian, with her light frame and quick smile, stepped forward. "That was some performance today, Kale," she said, her voice friendly but cautious. "I'm Lyra. We're curious about you. Draxos isn't known for its diplomatic contributions to the galaxy." Kale regarded her and the others. "I'm here to learn, same as you," he replied, his tone even. "Draxos teaches survival. The Academy teaches us to thrive. There's room for both, don't you think?" Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps there is at that. Welcome to the Academy, Kale. It looks like we have much to learn from each other." As Kale entered his room, he felt the weight of the day settling around him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he had earned a moment of peace. He looked again at the picture of his family, a silent affirmation of his purpose here. Whatever the Academy threw at him, he was ready, to not just survive, but to excel. The dawn at the Galactic Training Academy was punctuated not by the rising of Ionis Prime's twin suns but by the rhythmic pounding of boots on the training grounds. Cadets, both alien and human, assembled in formation, breath visible in the crisp morning air, faces set with determination. Today marked the beginning of advanced tactical training, a module notorious for its intensity and designed to weed out the less capable. Commander Zorax stood at the front, his figure imposing against the backdrop of the sprawling academy. Today, he began, his voice echoing across the field, you faced the survival challenge course. Not merely a test of physical endurance, but of mental resilience, strategic thinking, and your ability to work as a cohesive unit. The cadets shifted, anticipation mingling with anxiety. The survival challenge course was legendary, a grueling multi-environment ordeal set across several miles of the most treacherous terrain Ionis Prime had to offer. Rumors of its difficulty were a common whisper among the recruits. Kale stood among his peers, his expression unreadable. Back on Draxos, surviving the wild was a daily challenge. Here, it was a test. He listened intently as Zorax outlined the course. It would start in the dense forests of Ionis, move through artificially created Arctic and desert zones, and culminate in a simulated urban battlefield. Each environment was designed to simulate the conditions of known hostile planets across the galaxy. As the briefing concluded, the cadets were herded to the starting point. Kale found himself grouped with Lyra, the agile Zephyrian he had met earlier, and 3 others, a Nalradian named Gorks, known for his strength, a Terrian with advanced tactical knowledge called Alira, and Jax, a sharpshooter from the technologically advanced planet Sinus. The group exchanged terse nods. Remember, Lyra whispered as they took their positions, we need to finish as a team. It's not just about individual strength. The starting horn blared, and they were off. The forest was a thick maze of towering trees and underbrush, the ground uneven and littered with obstacles. Kale took the lead, his senses alert. He moved with a deliberate pace, setting a rhythm that the others struggled to match but eventually found. Unexpectedly, they stumbled upon the first challenge, a raging river, its waters swollen from artificial rain. A single log served as a bridge. While the others hesitated, Kale assessed the river's speed and the log's stability. With a nod to the team, he crossed first, offering a hand to help the others. Beyond the forest, the environment shifted dramatically. Snow began to fall, covering the ground in a thick blanket. The temperature plummeted. The cadets donned thermal gear, their breaths turning into clouds of steam. The Arctic zone tested their ability to withstand cold and navigate through blinding snowstorms. Here, Alira took the lead, using her knowledge of Arctic terrains to guide the team through hidden ice traps and steep inclines. The desert was next, a stark contrast to the cold they had just endured. The heat was oppressive, the sand fine and shifting underfoot. It was here that Gorks' endurance shone. He led the group, conserving water and finding the most solid ground to tread. Finally, they entered the urban zone, a labyrinth of abandoned buildings and narrow streets. Jax's skills came to the forefront, as he scoped out potential sniper nests and ambush points. Kale's combat instincts were invaluable, leading the team through simulated enemy attacks and booby traps. As they neared the end of the course, their bodies were pushed to the brink of exhaustion, but their spirits soared with the knowledge that they were about to complete the most difficult part of their training so far. The final challenge was a puzzle, a massive door that required a combination of strength, agility, and intelligence to open. Working together, they solved the puzzle. Kale and Gorks used their strength to turn the heavy gears, while Lyra and Jax maneuvered through tight spaces to access control panels, guided by Alira's instructions. As they burst through the door, the scene beyond was one of celebration. They had not only completed the course but had done so in record time. Commander Zorax, along with other instructors, awaited them with nods of approval and slight smiles of respect. That night, as they gathered in the mess hall, the group sat together, no longer just fellow cadets but a forged team. They talked, laughed, and shared stories from their homeworlds, their bonds strengthened by the ordeal they had faced together. Kale felt a sense of accomplishment but knew this was just the beginning. The challenges would only get tougher, the stakes higher. But now, he wasn't just a Deathworlder fighting for respect, he was part of a team, and together, they were unbeatable. The morning after the Survival Challenge course, the Academy buzzed with renewed energy and a hint of incredulity. Word had spread like wildfire about Kale and his team's record-setting performance. While admiration was common, there was also a pervasive sense of curiosity about how a team, especially one led by a Deathworlder, had managed such a feat. The instructors, intrigued and somewhat unsettled by the implications, began to scrutinize Kale's every move more closely. In the Academy's vast digital library, Kale found himself surrounded by holographic screens displaying advanced military strategies and historical combat data. He was deeply engrossed in studying the most celebrated tactical maneuvers from intergalactic battles, aware that physical prowess alone wouldn't keep him at the top in the coming tests. Commander Zorax had devised a new challenge to test the cadets further, a complex virtual simulation known as the Tactical Conqueror. This simulation was designed to mimic real-life combat scenarios across different worlds, each with its unique environment and tactical challenges. The cadets would need to use a combination of strategy, teamwork, and quick thinking to succeed. As the cadets assembled in the simulation chamber, the air was thick with anticipation. The chamber was a circular room with an array of sensors and high-definition projectors that could create nearly indistinguishable virtual realities. Today, the simulation was set on Varnus 4, a planet known for its dense, fog-covered jungles and unpredictable weather patterns. Kale's team, now operating with a smooth synergy, entered the simulation. The environment around them shifted, and they found themselves in the heart of a Varnusian jungle. The objective was clear: navigate through the hostile terrain, neutralize enemy targets, and capture strategic points within 2 hours. The simulation began, and Kale immediately took the lead, signaling his team to fan out in a diamond formation. They moved silently, their virtual boots sinking slightly into the soft, muddy ground. Alien sounds of the jungle filled their ears, distant roars and the eerie calls of unseen creatures. They encountered their first obstacle within minutes, a heavily fortified enemy bunker that blocked their path to the first strategic point. Kale analyzed the structure and its defenses quickly, then turned to Jax. "Sniper cover. We need a distraction." Jax nodded, finding a high vantage point to set up his sniper rifle. Meanwhile, Kale and Gorks prepared for a frontal assault. On Kale's signal, Jax fired, the sound muffled by the dense fog. As the enemy's attention turned to the source of the shot, Kale and Gorks charged. Lyra and Alira used the distraction to flank the bunker, taking down the remaining guards with precise, quiet shots. With the bunker secured, they quickly advanced, tackling 2 more strategic points with similar tactics. Kale's leadership and strategic decisions, combined with his team's now well-honed skills and coordination, made each encounter increasingly efficient. The final challenge was the toughest, a massive enemy base situated at the top of a hill, heavily guarded and fortified. Kale paused, surveying the area with a critical eye. Then, he outlined a plan that utilized each of their strengths. They split into 2 groups, with Kale and Gorks serving as the decoy, drawing out the main force of the enemy, while Lyra, Alira, and Jax maneuvered around to enter the base from the back. The plan was bold and risky, requiring perfect timing and execution. As they launched the assault, the simulation's environment responded with intensifying weather, adding howling winds and heavy rain into the mix, testing their resolve further. The battle was fierce, the sounds of virtual gunfire and explosions echoing around them. Kale and Gorks, relying on brute strength and resilience, kept the enemy engaged, while the others made their stealthy advance. Minutes ticked by, each second stretching out under the weight of concentration and adrenaline. Finally, as Kale took down the last of the enemy's front guards, a signal from Alira came through. Hearing the victorious tone in her voice over the comms, base secured. The simulation faded, and the chamber returned to its neutral state. The cadets, breathing heavily, looked around in mild disbelief. They had completed the Tactical Conqueror in under an hour, a record time that no one at the Academy had ever achieved before. Commander Zorax, who had been monitoring from the control room, entered the chamber, his usual stoic expression giving way to a rare, grudging smile. "Exceptional work, cadets," he acknowledged, his gaze lingering on Kale with a mix of respect and wariness. That evening, as the Academy discussed the day's shocking results, Kale and his team became the center of attention. Their performance had not just exceeded expectations, it had redefined what was thought possible at the Academy. Kale knew that with this recognition came increased scrutiny and expectations. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of pride. His team had proven that they were not just fighters, they were innovators on the battlefield. And as he retired to his quarters that night, Kale felt a profound sense of readiness for whatever challenges lay ahead. With his team by his side, he was unstoppable. Following their unprecedented success in the Tactical Conqueror simulation, the spotlight on Kale and his team intensified. The Academy's instructors, led by Commander Zorax, convened an urgent meeting to reassess the training curriculum. The discussion centered on the need to adapt the Academy's methods to better challenge cadets like Kale, whose capabilities seemed to stretch beyond the current limits of their program. In the high-ceiling strategy room, filled with the holographic displays of various training modules, Zorax addressed his colleagues with a sense of urgency. "We must evolve our training tactics," he asserted, his voice echoing slightly. "If one team can surpass our hardest simulations with such ease, it's clear our methods are outdated. We're preparing these cadets for real interstellar conflicts. They need to be pushed harder, challenged more." The proposal was met with nods of agreement. The instructors began brainstorming more complex scenarios, integrating advanced artificial intelligence adversaries and unpredictable environmental conditions that could adapt dynamically to the cadets' strategies. Meanwhile, Kale and his team were unaware of these behind-the-scenes discussions. They continued their training, now with a newfound reputation that brought both privileges and burdens. Other cadets looked up to them, seeking advice and guidance, while some harbored jealousy and skepticism, doubting the legitimacy of their achievements. Kale, however, remained focused on his personal growth and the cohesion of his team. He organized extra sessions with Lyra, Gorks, Elira, and Jax, where they would dissect each simulation in detail, exploring alternative strategies they could have employed. Their bond strengthened, not just as teammates but as friends who shared a deep respect for each other's strengths and weaknesses. One evening, as the team gathered in the Academy's library, Kale broached a subject that had been on his mind. "We've been successful because we think differently," he began, his eyes scanning the group. "Our diverse backgrounds give us unique perspectives. We shouldn't just react to simulations. We should be anticipating them, staying ahead." Elira, the tactician, leaned forward, intrigued. "You're suggesting we not only adapt to scenarios but try to predict or even influence what scenarios will be thrown at us?" she asked, her mind already racing through possibilities. "Exactly," Kale nodded. "We train not just to respond, but to control the environment, to create advantages." The discussion that followed was animated and insightful. They explored psychological warfare, environmental manipulation, and unconventional warfare tactics that utilized their unique attributes. As their strategies grew more sophisticated, the Academy's instructors implemented their new training modules. The next set of simulations was designed to be more challenging than anything the cadets had faced before. The environments were harsher, the AI enemies were smarter, and the objectives were more ambiguous, requiring not just brute force or tactical acumen but real ingenuity and adaptability. When Kale's team entered the next simulation, a scenario set on a volatile planet with shifting terrains and allegiance, they found themselves under immediate pressure. The AI adversaries used guerrilla tactics, striking swiftly and then vanishing into the thick, toxic mists that covered the landscape. The team struggled at first, their usual methods proving ineffective against such elusive enemies. Frustration mounted, and it was Lyra who called for a regroup. "Let's use the mists to our advantage," she suggested, her agile mind working quickly. "We can rig makeshift traps using the natural resources here. Turn their tactics against them." Her idea sparked a series of adaptations from the team. Gorks used his engineering skills to craft devices that could predict seismic shifts in the terrain, Jax set up long-range sensors to track enemy movements, and Elira devised a series of feints to draw the enemies into their traps. The simulation ended with the team's victory, achieved not through overwhelming power but through cunning and resourceful adaptation to the environment and enemy tactics. Their success under such tough conditions validated Kale's belief in the power of anticipation and adaptation. Back in the real world, as they debriefed, Zorax watched the team discuss their performance. There was a gleam of pride in his eyes, tempered with the realization that these cadets were rapidly outgrowing conventional training methods. "Excellent work," he congratulated them. "Continue pushing these boundaries. You are not just trainees, you are the architects of future warfare." That night, as Kale lay in his bunk reflecting on the day, he felt a profound shift in his perception of what was possible. They were no longer just surviving the Academy's challenges, they were thriving, setting new standards for what cadets could achieve. The galaxy was vast, and its conflicts were complex, but with his team by his side, Kale felt prepared to face whatever came their way. The impact of Kale and his team's recent victories rippled throughout the Galactic Training Academy, creating a mix of respect, envy, and heightened expectations among both cadets and faculty. As their exploits became the benchmark for success, tensions began to surface, manifesting in subtle ways across the Academy's social and training environments. Kale noticed the change during routine team exercises. Other cadets, once dismissive of the Deathworlder, now scrutinized his every move, whispering critiques or openly challenging his decisions. This scrutiny wasn't limited to Kale, his teammates felt it too. Lyra was often questioned about her agility-focused tactics, while Gorks faced doubts about his brute force approaches. Despite this, the team continued to perform exceptionally, their unity unshaken by external pressures. However, the atmosphere within the Academy wasn't solely defined by rivalry. A faction of cadets began to view Kale's team as a symbol of excellence to aspire to. They sought advice, attended the same supplemental lectures, and even mimicked their training routines. This admiration created a divide among the cadets, with some resenting the attention and accolades that Kale and his group received. Commander Zorax observed these dynamics with a tactical eye. He recognized the potential for these tensions to either forge stronger leaders or fracture the cadet corps. Deciding to address the situation proactively, Zorax convened a meeting with Kale and his team. "In your eyes, you have not only set new records but also new standards," Zorax began, his voice stern yet infused with a hint of pride. "However, it's crucial that you understand the broader implications of your success. You're leaders now, whether you chose to be or not. How you interact with your peers will influence this Academy's culture for years to come." Kale took the words seriously. He had never aspired to be anything more than the best cadet he could be, but the reality of their influence was undeniable. "We'll be mindful, sir," he responded, his tone reflecting his understanding of the responsibility they bore. Encouraged by Zorax's advice, Kale proposed an initiative to foster greater cooperation and understanding among the cadets. With approval from the Academy's administration, he organized a series of mixed team simulations, pairing members of his squad with cadets from different factions. The initiative, dubbed Unity Games, aimed to blend diverse skills and perspectives, emphasizing teamwork over individual prowess. The first of these simulations was set in a complex urban environment, requiring teams to secure and hold multiple objectives under dynamic conditions. The scenarios were tough, designed to force cadets to rely on one another regardless of previous rivalries or misconceptions. Initially, the Unity Games were met with mixed emotions. Some embraced the opportunity, while others participated with skepticism. However, as the exercises progressed, the benefits became apparent. Cadets who had never spoken to each other began communicating, sharing techniques, and even forming friendships. The atmosphere shifted from one of competition to camaraderie, reflecting the essence of what Kale had hoped to achieve. One particular session stood out. A team comprised of a once skeptical cadet named Varric and members of Kale's squad faced a critical challenge. An unexpected scenario twist left them isolated from their usual support, forcing them to innovate on the spot. Varric, who had previously doubted Kale's unconventional methods, found himself relying on those very tactics. The experience changed his perspective, not just on Kale's abilities but on the value of diverse thinking in combat situations. As the Unity Games concluded, the Academy buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose and respect among the Cadet Corps. Instructors noted an uptick in collaboration, and the overall performance levels increased across the board. Yet, not all were pleased with these developments. A small group of cadets, resistant to change and skeptical of Kale's rising influence, began to form a counterfaction. They clung to traditional methods and viewed the Unity Games as a threat to the established order. This group started to strategize, planning ways to undermine Kale's initiatives and restore what they considered the old way of doing things at the Academy. Kale, aware of this brewing discontent, remained watchful but undeterred. He knew that leadership was not without its challenges and that true unity at the Academy would require time and patience. As he prepared for the next phase of their training, he was more determined than ever to prove that innovation and inclusivity could coexist with tradition, shaping a stronger future for all interstellar defenders. As the academic year drew to a close at the Galactic Training Academy, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The cadets, now more united thanks to Kale's Unity Games, were preparing for the final test, a culmination of all they had learned, a complex real-world mission simulation that would determine their readiness for active duty in the interstellar military. Commander Zorax announced that this year's final test would be unlike any before. Instead of individual or small team assessments, the entire graduating class would participate in a full-scale operation designed to simulate a critical battle on a contested planet known as Helios Prime. The scenario involved securing vital installations, rescuing hostages, and neutralizing enemy forces, all under the harsh conditions of Helios Prime's volatile environment. Kale and his team were at the heart of the planning sessions. Their previous successes had set high expectations, and they were determined not to disappoint. Kale, ever the strategist, devised a plan that leveraged the diverse strengths of various cadet groups. He proposed a decentralized command structure that allowed teams to make real-time decisions based on ground realities, a significant shift from the Academy's traditionally rigid command hierarchy. As the simulation began, the cadets were deployed onto the simulated battlefield, a vast area equipped with holographic projectors and environmental control systems to mimic the rugged, storm-swept landscapes of Helios Prime. The operation started at dawn, with teams navigating through thick, swirling mists and over rocky terrains, echoing the challenges they had faced in training but amplified to a near-overwhelming intensity. Kale's team was tasked with securing the central command post, a strategic objective critical to the success of the mission. As they approached, they encountered heavy resistance. The enemy AI, programmed to be as unpredictable and formidable as possible, launched a fierce counterattack. Kale and his teammates found themselves pinned down, their usual tactics stymied by the AI's aggressive maneuvers. In the heat of battle, Kale realized they needed to adapt. Signaling to his team, he called for a retreat to a nearby ridge, where they could regroup and reassess. "We need to change our approach," he told them, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Let's turn their aggression against them. We'll feint retreat then circle around to flank them from the north." The maneuver was risky, requiring precise timing and coordination under fire, but Kale's leadership galvanized the team. They executed the plan flawlessly, catching the AI off guard and successfully securing the command post. The victory was a turning point in the simulation, allowing Allied cadet forces to advance on other objectives with the central command post as their operational base. Meanwhile, other teams, inspired by the initiative and resilience shown by Kale's group, adapted similar tactics to their respective challenges. Varric's team, once skeptical of Kale, performed a daring rescue of hostages using a stealth approach they had learned during the Unity Games. As the simulation concluded, the cadets assembled in the debriefing hall, where Commander Zorax and the Academy's senior instructors awaited. The room was charged with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Zorax stepped forward, his expression stern but his eyes gleaming with pride. "Today, you have not just completed a test, you have demonstrated the values and skills that will define your careers as defenders of our galaxy," he announced. "You adapted, you led, and most importantly, you unified under pressure. You are ready." The cadets erupted in cheers, a sound of collective triumph that filled the hall. Cale looked around at his fellow cadets, their faces flushed with victory and newfound confidence. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just in their performance, but in how far they had come as a team and a community. At the graduation ceremony, as Cale received his commission, he knew that the lessons learned at the academy would stay with him forever. He had arrived as a lone Deathworlder, underestimated and isolated, but he was leaving as a leader, a strategist, and a unifier. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges and threats, but he was ready to face them, with his team by his side, prepared to defend and protect the diverse worlds that made up their interstellar community.